Okay, so it's the additional example that we're looking at, and you can download it from your Blackboard. So what we want to focus on in this lecture is the second part here, right? We want to do the note, and I'm going to show you what it looks like when we do a note on earnings per share, right? And so let's read this and just understand what they're asking. So they say, prepare the earnings per share note that accompany the financial statements of X Limited for the year ended 2016. So that tells us what is our current year. The current year that we're dealing with is 20X6 or 2016. So that is the year that we're looking at. Now remember, with EPS comparatives, right? So they're always going to ask you for the prior year numbers. So we're looking at 2016 and 2015, or 20X6 and 20X5. So those are the years that we're looking for. Those are the years we want to look out for in our question as well. And then the note says, comparatives are required, but we know that EPS questions, generally that's the case. And then it says, show all calculations and make cross references. Okay, cool. So what I'm going to do when we're doing this question is I'm going to try and show you how I would compile it, how I would do the question. Now, I'm not saying that you must use this method, but what I'm saying is that it's that I use. So I'm not saying it's the right method or the best method. It's just what I do. Okay. So you guys can use it or just not use it if you don't want to. And basically what it means is that I cut out doing certain tasks and I try and streamline the system as much as possible. But if you're not feeling confident, then I don't think you should do that. Okay, so let's read the question. Under information, it says X Limited has a 31 December year end. Okay, and that's important. So it's important to know the year end because it helps us with the counting of months. And the EPS question has a lot of months in EPS questions. So we need to be very careful and just remember the months that are there so that we can count them quite easily. Okay, so 31 December year end. Then it says on 1 January 2015. So this is the beginning of the year that we are wanting to consider. This is the beginning of the prior year. Okay, so this is important now. On 1 January 2015, X Limited had the following issued share capital and debentures. Now, issued is important because remember you have your capital and debt instruments can be in two forms or two states. They can be in the issued state, meaning that they're out and people have them, or they can be in the authorized state. So when we're doing EPS, we want to only concern ourselves with the issued stuff that's already out in the public. Okay, so we only want to do the issued state. Okay, right. So get your calculators and just have your calculators on hand because I'm going to ask you guys to do a few calculations while we read. Okay, and then I want you to pop your answers in the chat. Okay, so it says the first part, there's 1,600,000 ordinary shares issued at 50 cents a share or 0.5 rands, right? So 50 cents a share. So that's the first one. So there's 1,600,000. It says there's 500,000 cumulative preference shares issued at 2 rand per share. Okay, so there's 500,000 cumulative preference shares issued at 2 rand a share with a fixed annual dividend of 10 cents per share. Now, your first task is to calculate the dividends for the cumulative preference shares. So calculate the dividend, the cumulative preference shares, the total dividends, and put it in the chat box for me. While you guys are doing that, I'm just going to read the next part. So the next part says there's 300,000 10% convertible There's 300,000 10% convertible debentures issued at 1 rand. Yes, so the correct answer is 50,000 rand for the cumulative preference dividends is 50,000 rand. Now on the next one, so on the debentures, there's 300,000 debentures and they're at 1 rand 50. So what is the total liability? Not dividends. What's the total liability for the debentures? Can you calculate the total liability for me? What's the total debenture amount? So in your calculator, you're gonna pop in. There we go. So the total liability, the total consideration that came in for the debentures was 450,000. Okay. So obviously, if that's 450,000, the interest, right? Remember, debentures and interest. The interest on that amount would be 10% of 450,000, which is 45,000. Okay. So the interest is going to be 45,000, and that's, I popped that in the chat. So that is the interest. Now we need to keep all of these amounts here, and we need to remember them because they're going to become important a little bit later. Okay. So and then we read under additional information, it says X Limited issued the following shares on 1 October 2015. So 2015 is in the prior year, and 1 October is how many months before the end of that year? Okay, so it's 3 months. So it's October, November, December. So 3 months before the end of the year, they issued these shares. Why is this important? Because if the statements that come later are for value issue, we need to weight the for value issue. That's why we want to know how many months, what month of the year is this. So this is, there's 3 months left in the year. Okay. There's 3 months left in the year. Yeah, warehouse. We want to weight them in the warehouse. So there were 50,000 ordinary shares that were issued for cash. So that for cash tells us it's a for value issue, right? The cash for the shares were receivable on the same day. Okay, cool. So there were it's a for value issue of ordinary shares. It's going to go into warehouse. Okay, and we need to weight that at 3/12. We need to weight it at 3/12. Okay. So that's important, right? So that first one we must remember when we're doing our awareness calculation. Then we've got 200,000 cumulative redeemable preference shares. Now notice what's happened here. When we spoke about the shares up there, you'll see an X appearing, right? So when we spoke about the cumulative preference shares up here, there was no redeemable in the name. But when we looked at the point where the circle is appearing now, there's a redeemable in the name. So that tells us that there are 2 types or 2 classes of preference shares. There's preference shares that are just normal preference shares. There's no redeemable element to them. And then we've got a redeemable preference share. So there's 2 types of preference shares that we're dealing with here. Now this becomes important, you see. So it says there are 200,000 redeemable preference shares at 2 rand each, right? So that will be 400,000 rand, and they earn a fixed dividend of 15 cents. So what's the dividend? Calculate for me the dividend on the redeemable preference shares, the cumulative redeemable preference shares, and pop that one into the chat. Right, so, and now what we need to remember is, there we go, someone said 30,000. Right, so what we need to remember is now, guys, in 2015, so in the prior year, we're going to need to weight the dividends, right? So when we're calculating earnings, we're going to need to weight these dividends in the prior year because we only received, or we only issued these shares at least halfway through the year, and because this is a fixed annual dividend, it's prorated, or the word is apportioned for parts of the year, because the words fixed annual dividend is there. That means we can weight it, or apportion it for part of the year. So so that 30,000 is going to be weighted in 2015, right? Let's continue reading. It says the cash for these shares were received on the same day. The preference shares are redeemable at the option of the entity, and therefore they are classified as equity. Now, in back to 100, we're only going to be doing preference shares as equity. We're not doing liability preference shares. Okay, so don't. As long as you see, you can read that, but it's not going to change materially for you guys anything. So yeah, okay. So it says. So I'm reading point 2 now. It says. So at the bottom of the page, point 2, all the 10% convertible debentures, as soon as we see that word convertible, what do we start thinking? We start thinking of dilutive earnings per share, right? We must take it into account in dilutive earnings per share. Remember, we said whenever there's convertible, whether it's convertible debentures or convertible preference shares, we need to start taking it into account in dilutive earnings per share. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So it says the 10% convertible debentures in issue on 1 January 2015. So what they're actually talking about, these 300,000 here, right? That's what they're talking about. So they're saying the ones that were already in issue and we already read about earlier on, right? They were originally issued on 1 July 2013. So they were issued 2 years ago, which is outside our years that we're looking at. So we don't, all it's telling us is that it's been an issue for full 12 months. So we don't need to worry about apportioning anything there. Right, so it says assume that all necessary approvals were received for the convertible debenture issue. Okay, so it says on 1 May 2016. Now this is in the current year. Okay, 1 May 2016 is in the current year, right? So 1 May 2016, it says X Limited converted all the 10% convertible debentures into ordinary shares of 3 Rand per ordinary share. Now this is, I want to teach you how to find the number of ordinary shares. Remember, when we're dealing with WANOs, we only want to look at ordinary shares. We never want to deal or work with the convertible instrument. We're looking at the number of ordinary shares that they yield or that they create. Okay, so that's what we want to do. So first question, 1 May 2016, 1 May 2016, right? How many months of 2016 were these convertible debentures still convertible debentures? Type your answer in the chat. How many months were they still convertible debentures for? Right? Because remember, within the year they changed. We started the year at 1 January. We moved up to 1 May, and then they changed. From 1 May, they weren't debentures anymore. They were ordinary shares. See, so for 4 months, correct? So for 4 months of the year, they were convertible debentures, and for the other 8 months of the year, they were ordinary shares. Okay, so we must keep that in mind. So when they were ordinary shares, we're going to take them into account in our basic earnings per share, right? Because remember, basic earnings per share deals with the real shares in issue, right? Whereas diluted earnings per share deals with shares that may come in the future, right? So for 4 months of the year, they were potential shares, right? So they may have become ordinary shares. And so we're going to put them in diluted for 4 months of the year. And then for the other 8 months of the year, when they actually were real shares, we need to move them and they need to appear in the basic calculation, the basic WANOS calculation. Okay, now, in the past, what we did is when we had these debentures, you'd read in your questions, for every 10 debentures, you're going to get 1 share, or something like that, right? Or for every 3 debentures, you're going to get 5 shares, something similar to that. Now, in this specific example, it's slightly differently. Now, I want to show you what they mean. So we calculated a little bit earlier on, we calculated an amount of 450,000 for capital. Okay. So there's 450,000 for the liability, 450,000 for the liability of convertible debentures. Right? There was 450,000 for that, and now they're telling us that it's 3 rand per ordinary share. So if we were to take that 450,000 and convert it into ordinary shares, what amount would we get? Right? And how do we do that calculation? We take 450,000 and we divide it by the 3 rand that it costs us to buy one ordinary share. So let's type that into our calculator. So 450,000 divided by 3 rand. So we're getting 150. Does everyone understand how we got to this? Let me just, I'm just going to repeat it again because it can be sometimes tricky. We took the total liability amount, right? Because they're telling us that the ordinary shares were at 3 rand per share, right? So whatever debenture liability we had, we have to buy the ordinary shares, technically buy them. I'm using inverted commas, but you can't see because my camera's off. We technically had to buy them at 3 rand a share. So we had 450 liability, right? Now, when we try to buy shares, ordinary shares with that 450, we're going to get ourselves a total of 150,000 ordinary shares. And remember, for WANOS, we only look at ordinary shares. So that amount now becomes very important. That 150 becomes very important. And this, guys, this specific section, this calculation is something that trips up students a lot, right? It trips up students a lot. Because the actual capital, that amount of 450 is not, you can't see it in the question. So you need to calculate it. So because of that, it can get quite tricky. So the original amount stays the same. Yes, so the original amount of liability that those people gave us, the debenture holders, all we're doing is we saying, okay, it was a liability, now it must become equity, right? So that's what we're saying. And in order to convert it into equity, what we're saying is for each share, they must pay us 3 rand. So that total amount of 450 has remained the same. Instead, we've moved it out of the liability account and we've now put it in the share capital account. Okay. I see that my internet is a bit low, so it might be able to crack me on your side. Unfortunately, I don't really know what I can do about that, but yeah. So does everybody understand again? So that 450, we calculated it by getting the total liability out of the convertible debentures, and then we divided it by the number that we told each ordinary share cost, so that we can get the total amount of ordinary shares. Okay, that might be tricky for some people. So just pay attention to your questions if you get something along those lines. Okay, so we're going to go to the next page, so page 2 of the question. And then we see on 1 June 2016. So again, this is in the current year. How many months is it? It's 6 months. Sorry, it's not 6 months. So far, it's 7 months in the year, right? We haven't read the rest of the statement. So let's just see what the statement says. So notice how the examiner, he bolded the 1 June, right? I would have, if I was setting this paper, I would have actually bolded that second date. But anyway, on 1 June 2016, X Limited issued 200,000 ordinary shares for cash. So it's a 4 value issue. With 4 value issues in the current period, we waited, right? It says the cash was receivable on 1 July. So remember what we spoke about when we were speaking about 4 value issues. We said we must only weight it when the capital is available to the actual company. So only when the capital can be used by the company, right? And then we said that idea of there must be a debit something, debit bank, debit debtors. There must be debit something. And so what they're trying to say to us in this statement is that debit, that increase in resources, only came about on the 1st of July. Okay, so how many months do we need to wait it for? We need to wait it for 6 out of 12, not 7 out of 12, because the issuing of the shares is an administrative process, right? Issuing the shares, preparing the share certificate, sending it out to the shareholders, that's all administrative. The important part for us is, when did we have access to the capital? That's the important. When did we have access to the capital? And we had access on 1 July. Okay, so that's the date that we're going to weight it from. Okay, important. So then the next sentence says, on the 1st of October 2016, X Limited issued capitalization shares. So there was a capitalization issue, right? So there's a capitalization shares on the basis of 1 ordinary share for every 20 ordinary shares held. Okay, so we need to now figure out how much was being held, how many shares were in issue on 1 November 2016. That's our job now. How do we find that amount? We're going to deal with it just now. It says, assume the necessary approvals were received, right, for the capitalization issue. And then it gives us this extract, which we're familiar and we've seen before. It's the extract of the profit and loss and other comprehensive income statement. And in there, we got profit before tax, we got the tax, and we've got the profit after tax. So we know that this profit after tax amount is the amount that we need to work with, right? We must work with the after tax amount. Why? Because the owners of the company do not owe or can't take claim to the tax, right? Because they have to pay the government tax. So we need to take that amount. It tells us that there's ordinary share dividends declared in both years and the respective amounts, and then finally it gives us the tax rate at the bottom, the 28%. In our questions, we normally like to say it's 28% and debenture interest is deductible. Okay, so just to remind the students that they must look at debentures. Okay, so now let's go and we're going to have a look at the solution, and I just want to show you now how we're going to. So we're starting off with the profit. Okay, and what, if you remember our slides, we had something on the slide. It said profit for the year minus, what was the thing that we had to minus? It said profit for the year, and then we had minus something underneath. What was that thing that we had to minus underneath? It was minus the fixed preference dividend. Okay, so that's going to be our first task. We want to start off with minusing the fixed preference dividend. Okay, now again, remember the amounts that we calculated, right? So we said I just want to refresh our memories. We said that the first dividend, which was the cumulative preference shares, the one that's not redeemable, that was 50,000. And then the other one, the one that was redeemable and was issued in 2015, that one was, I think someone calculated it for me. I think it was 30,000. Okay. So let's just keep that in mind and remember that we need to wait. We need to wait them when they were issued in the year. So let's look at our calculation now. Okay. So if we have a look, it should be loading on your side soon. Right. So if we have a look at, I'm just going to start in the middle of the page. So under calculations. Okay. If we have a look at what they've done here, they've started with profit for the year. Now, profit for the year, easy. They copied it straight out of the question, right? It came straight out of the question. They put profit for the year. Now, the next part is less fixed portion of preference dividends. Let's look at the calculation. So in both years, because remember the cumulative preference shares, there were no movements throughout the period that we were looking at. So in both years, they had 500,000 times 10%, times 10 cents at least, and they had that 50,000 Rand. Now we could calculate that, and if we did, we would get half a mark there, and then so that's the half a mark there, and then we also get another half mark for principal mark, right? So far we've if we got the profit, if you copied the profit straight out of the question, and if you calculated the 50,000 Rand preference share dividends correctly, so far you got 2 marks, right? Now let's have a look at the redeemable. So I'm going to calculation 3, right? We're looking at the redeemable preference shares, the cumulative redeemable preference shares. So in 2015, right, it was issued in 1 October, which is 3 months before the end of the year, right? It was issued 3 months before the end of the year. So they took the 30,000 Rand, which we calculated, right? And they apportioned it for 3 months over 12, so 3 over 12. And we got an amount of 750, right? Oh, sorry, not 750, 7,500. So that is now our dividend for 2015. In 2016, there was no need to apportion it. It was in issue for the whole year, so they took the whole 30,000. So this is what they did. So if you go up to the calculation again, they plumped that 30,000 there in 2016, and then they put the apportioned amount. They put the apportioned amount in 2015, and so you get half a mark for putting the 30,000 there, and you get 1 mark for putting the 7,500. So in total, we've got 3.5 marks so far. Okay, so 3.5 marks so far. We're doing pretty good, right? Now the operation. Remember, I typed it out in the chat, but just the logic behind it. We must minus or reduce the dividend, the profit by the dividend. Why? Because the ordinary shareholders, these are the shareholders that we're preparing this for. The ordinary shareholders have no right to the preference shares, preference share dividends. So the ordinary shareholders have no right to the preference dividends. Therefore, we reduce, we must take it away. We must say, you don't have a right to this, we're taking it away. So that's why we minus, right? Can you guys see the option? We're minusing, that's what the brackets are for. We're minusing these two amounts, right? Very important, okay? Now, notice there's no mark allocated for this total here, because regardless of what you get, whether you typed it in your calculator wrong or not, we're not going to penalize you, right? So that's a good thing. Okay, so now we've arrived at basic earnings. That was pretty easy, right, guys? Give me a thumbs up if you thought you could handle that. So far, we've just done the preference dividend by following our formula. Okay. Anyway, let's now look at the after-tax debenture interest. So again, why are we even looking at this? Why are we considering this? We are thinking about it and considering it because of that word convertible, right? So that was the trick. That was the trigger, at least. That word convertible forced us to start thinking about it. Okay, forced us to start wanting to use it. Now, in 2015, okay, in 2015, this specific instrument was in issue. Okay, so it was issued, but there was sort of nothing that happened with it. The whole year, nothing happened with it. So we had this interest of 45,000, right, which you guys calculated, right? You calculated the 45,000. We had this 45,000, and all we needed to do was take off the tax. That minusing 72 is taking off the tax, or times it by 70. 2%, is taking out the tax, and we get an amount of 32,400. Okay, so notice where the marks are allocated. They're allocated for using the correct percentage, and they're allocated for using. So this calculation was actually, the marks for this calculation was given just a little bit up on the previous page. Let's go back there and I'll show you. So it was allocated for just copying that amount down correctly. All right, so if you have a look here, this is the calculation we did. We said 300,000 times 150,000. Sorry, 150 gave us 450,000 times the 10%, and that's the interest amount, right? So 45,000 of interest. Now, what we were told is that in May, right, in May of that year, they converted the shares. And you guys correctly told me that it's 4 months of the year. Okay, so for 4 months of the year, they were debentures, right? For the other 4 months of the year, they were ordinary shares. And because they were ordinary shares, they did not attract debenture interest. Okay, they did not get debenture interest for 8 months of the year. They only got debenture interest for 4 months of the year. So what we're doing there is we saying 45,000 times 4 divided by 12. Okay, so we are portioning it for 4 months of the year. Then we're getting an amount and we applying or removing the tax of 72 by multiplying it by 72%. Okay, so again, we're taking the 45,000 and apportioning it. And which number are we using? We're using the amount of months it was a debenture. So it was a debenture for 4 months, and it was a ordinary share for 4 months, for 8 months. So we use the 4 months. Okay, so don't get confused and don't use 8 months here. So that's something that students make a mistake with. Okay, and then we remove the tax and we get 10,800. Okay, now notice the operation. We add it into our table, right? We add it into our table. You see, we're adding the prior year and the current year into our table. Okay, so if you get that operation right, you can also get marks for that. Now, what I want to show you is this. So if we go to the last, page. Okay, now let's zoom in here. If you look at the earnings reconciliation, look at the amounts in the earnings reconciliation. There's profit, there's cumulative dividends, there's preference dividends, at least there's cumulative redeemable preference dividends. Then they've also got the debenture interest. Do these amounts look similar? Yes, this is in fact the exact same amounts that we used in our earnings calculation. The exact same amounts that we used in our earnings calculation. Okay, so what I do, now again, this is just the way I do things. You don't have to copy me. What I do is when I am preparing, when I'm doing like a test question or reviewing a test question or something, I actually don't do that earnings calculation. I come straight here and I populate my note. I just write straight in here. Okay, I just go straight in here and start writing. What I would do is I would memorize this the statement at the top, because remember you get a mark for it, right? You'll also get a mark for saying that at the top. So there's normally like a half mark there, and then I would memorize this the statement, and I would also memorize these statements under the where-nos as well. Okay, and then when I'm doing it, I'm saving myself time because I'm not doing the calculation and then transferring the numbers, and I'm just doing it straight in here. So I'm saving myself time. And ultimately, if you think about it, the numbers are not going to change when you move them across, right? Because you're under so much pressure. Most of the time, you're not like double checking, although you should. You're not like double checking. For us now during COVID, I would memorize this and I would encourage you to memorize it. But sometimes students will use other methods during COVID to get the wording right. I'm not going to say what methods, but which are not probably the right thing to do. So, but that's what I would encourage you to do, to learn the words so that you come straight here and populate the note. Okay, so let's go back and have a look at Vanos now. Okay, any questions so far? Just everyone seems to be a bit quiet. If there's any questions, just pop them in the chat, right? And I'll deal with them. So if you look at what's happening in Vanos, and this is why I encouraged you the other day to maybe look at things in a chronological order. Chronological means like in a date order. So if you look at what they've done here, they came in with an opening balance of 1.6 million, right? That was easy. We can do that. And then they did the issue on October. Remember, there was a 50,000 shares. So they put the full amount in actual, right? And then the full amount in 2016. Why? Because it was only issued in the prior year, right? There was only that one issue in the prior year. And then they've taken the 50,000 and multiplied by 3 over 12 because they're trying to apportion it. It's a four value issue, right? So because it's a four value issue, they're apportioning it for part of the year that it was an issue. And it was an issue from October to the 3 months. They're using 3 months, right? And not 9 months, please, guys. And you get an amount of 12,500, right? And that gives you your total at the end of 2015. Okay, that's your total at the end of 2015. Now, notice now, let's have a look at 2016. So in 2016, we started off the year in May, right, when we converted the shares. So 4 months into the year, we converted the debentures into ordinary shares. Okay, now look at this 150. That 150 is the 150 we had calculated, right? So it's 450,000 divided by the 3 rands per share. Okay, that's the 150, right? Now that 150 was issued or they were ordinary shares for only 8 months of the year. Remember we said there were debentures for 4 months of the year and then there were ordinary shares for the other 8 months of the year. So they apportion it for the period of time that it was ordinary shares. The other thing is this is a full value issue technically. How do we know it's a full value issue? Because they transferred the 450,000 Rand into ordinary shares. They moved it from liabilities into ordinary shares. And because of that movement, it full value issue. Okay, does that make sense? It's a full value issue. That's why we are portioning it, right? We portion it for the amount of time that it was an ordinary share, which was 8 months of the year, and we get 100,000. We get 100,000. Notice there's nothing in 2015. Why? Because this issue only happened in 2016. So if you put anything here, any amount here, you're going to lose a mark, right? Well, not really. You're not going to lose a mark, but doesn't look good. So don't put anything there, please, guys. So that's that. So then we read that on 1 July 2016, there was an issue of ordinary shares of 200,000. There's the 200,000 there. And they apportioned it for the 6 months of the year that it was already in issue. And we get 100,000. Again, nothing in the prior year because this issue happened only in the current year and it's a full value issue. Okay, now this is exam technique. Okay, so now this next point is about exam technique. Whenever you have a capitalization issue, guys, make sure you have a subtotal before, right? So this is what this column is all about. It's the subtotal just before the capitalization issue. Okay, this is what they're doing here. So they're making a subtotal before the capitalization issue. They're adding all of the amounts up. Why? So that when they're making the capitalization issue, they know what amount to use. Right? So they're adding all of these amounts up, and then these totals are ending up in the capitalization calculation. Can you see that? that's why it's so important to add that just before the capitalization issue. That is a good exam technique thing, right? So anyway, we take the 2 million that we added up and we divide it by 20, right? We can multiply it by 1, but obviously that's not going to change the number at all. So then we get an amount of 100,000. So we know that the maximum capitalization issue has to be 100,000. Okay, so that's what was actually issued, 100,000. Okay, now if we look at what's happening this year, we again taking the total divided by 20 and we're getting 92,000. And then we're taking the total again divided by 20 and we're getting 80,625 shares. Okay, when we total those amounts up, we get basic values. Okay, this is the basic values, the total of those amounts. Now, again, this is what I do, and you don't need to do this. What I would do is I would actually stop this table here, right? So again, this is what I do. You don't have to do it. I would stop this table here, and I would take these amounts, right? This basic earnings per share amounts, and I would actually go straight to my note, right? Because if you have a look in our Vanos recon, which is here, that's where those amounts are coming from. Those amounts are coming from that base earnings per share column in the table. Okay, and then I would do the dilutive effects. I would do it in the note. Okay, and I wouldn't waste time writing it out. So this are the shares, the convertible shares. And what they've done is they've taken the shares. Remember, we said we're going to get 150, right? And they've said, okay, for 8 months of the year, they were ordinary shares. And for the 4 months of the year, they were debentures. So they've multiplied it by 4/12. Okay. That's how they got that 50. Notice also the operation, they're adding it. Why? Because they are trying to say, okay, if they became ordinary shares, right? If they were ordinary shares, what would be the effect? And that's why they're adding it back. So they're adding it back, or they're adding it, not adding it back, they're just adding it to the basic to get the diluted values. Right? And that's how I would do it. I would do it directly in this table. I wouldn't do it in the calculation. But if you aren't feeling confident about that, right? So if you are scared about doing that, and you feel that you need the table, you're more than welcome to do it in the table. So the table is just doing the same thing. It's just having the narrations and the calculations a bit more clearly. Okay. And so that's the note, guys. That's what that looks like. And so we've basically populated and done this entire note, right? So we've done the note, but they're going to ask us and we're going to have a question eventually about dividends, right? So how do they do the dividends? When we're doing dividends per share, we are going to take this amount, right? So the actual column in the Vanos table for the current year number of shares, right? And we'll take that and divide it by the dividends that was paid. But for the actual number of shares in the prior year, okay, the prior year amount, what we do is we start off here. Let me change my color. We start off there, right? Sorry, I lie. We start off here in the actual column again, right? And we move that amount all the way down there. That's where that amount is. Right? So they start off with the actual column for the prior year, and then all they do is they add in the capitalization issue. Okay. All they do is they add in the capitalization issue, and that's your number of shares for your dividends per share in the prior year, so in 2015. Okay. So we've basically gone through this whole example Do you guys think that this is something that you can do?